inflation numbers just came out. And, oh, glory day, they're down. But I looked at it a little bit differently. Now I try to avoid news and other things on my channel because I'm trying to talk about things that get you to look at more things creatively and how can you exercise your brain. But part of exercising your brain is being able to look at things you're being told and saying, is this rational? Is this real? Is this really kind of the right answer? And can you figure out for yourself instead of just kind of being told the answer? Can you say, hey, look, does that pass the reality test? So let's talk about inflation for just a minute. And the other reason I try to avoid news is everybody's going to say, oh, you're pro this political party or pro that political party. And personally, I think this particular election cycle is a great national embarrassment. And I think we should cancel the national paleontology discussion and kind of find two new candidates, but that's just me. Now, inflation. The numbers are down in the sort of 3% range. That's a good thing in a way, but let's kind of look at whether or not that is actually time for celebration. Now, in the last couple of years, inflation has kind of been crazy, right? So this is the Federal Reserve database. I'm just showing you the raw data here. This is straight from the source, from the Federal Reserve Economic Database. They give it to you through the St. Louis Fed. Anybody can look this stuff up. It's free to the public. These are inflation, consumer prices for the United States. 2020 inflation was about 1.2%. What was going on? We were all trapped in our homes. We were sort of not really doing much. It is what it is. 2021, it was 4.69. That's a little higher than people like to see it. The general rule of thumb is, hey, let's get it to 3%, nothing above that. Above that, bad. Below that, bad. A lot of reasons why below that is bad. I'll spare you because I disagree with that. I think zero inflation would be great, but I'm not in charge. So 2021, 4.69%. 2022 hurt. It was 8%. Remember, this is not prices going down. This is how much have they increased over the previous year. So it went up 4.7%, basically, if you're around 8%, but it was 8% off of that already increased 4%. So that's actually a little bit bigger number than that if you look at it relative to like 2020. So you got 4%, then you got 8%, and then 2023, you got 4.1. Those are big numbers 3 years in a row. And this year it's down to about three. Interesting point. Has anybody's salary kept pace with those numbers? When you got 65% of the United States living paycheck to paycheck, when you've just gone through years where it's 4.7, 4.69, 8.0, and 4.1, 3.0 is good, but remember, it's still an increase. It's not a zero increase. It's just less of a slightly less large of an increase. But if you're still living paycheck to paycheck, that's a problem. Annual raise in the United States is roughly cost of living adjustment in the United States about 3%. So great, finally keeping up with inflation right now, but you haven't caught up to these years that punched you in the gut, right? So it's not cause for celebration just yet. Now, these numbers are the ones you should hear on the news. These are the ones that you typically don't. Usually the ones you'll hear is this thing called sticky price consumer price index, less food and energy. So what they do is they take food and energy out of those numbers, and this is the number that normally gets reported. And look at these things. They're higher if you take out food and energy up until, taking this out, you get sort of this number here. So 4.2%. Right now, they're reporting this other number because it's the one that benefits them to report it. And that's great. That's a good thing because food and energy in there, that's good, right? But this one is an interesting thing. Now, let's look really what this means. So let's go back to this one. Inflation as measured by Consumer Price Index reflects the annual percentage change to the cost of average requiring a basket of goods and services that may be fixed or changed at different intervals. This particular one is the one you really, really want because it includes this overall basket of stuff, food, fuel, energy, uh, rent, all that kind of stuff in that number. That's an important number. But 2023 was still 4.1. Nobody's caught up yet. Now, let's go look at why that inflation rate is down. This is called the M2 money supply. How much cash is there out there? If you look, it's been going up since forever. So, okay, fine. But let's just look at sort of recent history. 2020, we had 15 trillion, I think it is, dollars in circulation. But anyways, remember 15 is the important part. But then all of a sudden, look, we're up at 18 by the end of 20, just 6 months later, we're up at 18. Well, that was COVID. We just created a whole bunch of money out of nowhere, but we didn't stop creating it. Look, it kind of keeps going, right? 2022, we peaked out and then we stopped creating it and we pulled it back down. But if you look at what happened right there, interest rates went up, right? The Federal Reserve prime lending rate went up. Then the money starts coming back out of the economy. Now they're talking about doing a rate decrease again. Guess what's going to happen? Money supply is going to go back up. When you do a rate decrease, what happens is inflation tends to rear its ugly head again. So as they're talking about a rate decrease because, oh, it'll help the mortgage industry, okay, sure, but is it going to help everything? And it's really not. It's going to cause that inflation to kind of jump up again. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that's not a great thing. I don't want to see higher interest rates more than anybody else. Okay, I really don't. Bad thing. I don't like high interest rates. I don't like debt. Kind of allergic to it. But my point is that when you hear these things on the news, think through them for yourself and think for a second, are they really telling me everything I need to know? And when they start throwing data at you, pay very careful attention to where they get that data. It's usually down in the little corner of the screens. That's Federal Reserve data, and it'll tell you what the data set is. You got Google, go look it up. The stuff is free on the web. But you know, when you see things that are out there looking like they're too good to be true, usually they are. And the other thing, when it comes, especially when it comes to inflation, the thing that really bothers me is like, oh, look, here's the Dow numbers. The Dow is up. Holy goodness gracious, gosh, God Almighty, the whole, bring me all the muffins and bagels in the land. It's a good thing, right? The economy's fixed. The Dow is up. That's not the measure of the economy. Who's living paycheck to paycheck? How much money do people have in the bank? Do they have more than $5,000? And if you look at it, last time I looked the numbers up, which was just a couple weeks ago, 65% of the country had less than $5,000 in the bank. 65% had less than 5 grand. If you look at number up to like 20 grand, it gets even worse. So how are you going to afford to buy a house with a down payment? What happens if you have a major medical expense? You have no recourse, especially with prices the way they are. I took 4 kids, my 3 kids out to dinner, just me and the 3 kids to a not expensive restaurant the other day. It was $100. I mean, fast food's 50 for 4 of us, right? So, $1,000 doesn't go that far. $5,000 doesn't go that far. 20 grand, okay, that gets you a little bit further, right? But what happens if you're a single, I'm single, so what happens if I lose my job and I've only got 5 grand in the bank? What really goes on there, right? That's a big problem. And that's 65% of the country. 65%. So in an election year, there's going to be all kinds of crazy stuff all over the news touting, oh, look, we can celebrate now. Inflation's down to 3. But if salaries aren't keeping pace, who the hell cares? And when you still haven't caught up with the last 3 years of crap that's gone on, do you really give a shit if inflation is down to 3%? Because you're still going to be hurting worse than you were last month because your salary's barely keeping pace and life's still not what it was 3, 4 years ago. And especially if you look at rents have gone through the roof. They're a major part of what's driving that. But all of a sudden, rents have started to stabilize. All of a sudden, housing prices have started to stabilize, but it's because interest rates are up. The moment we drop interest rates, guess what happens? Boom, through the roof. So everybody, please take it with a grain of salt. When you see these numbers, don't think, oh, this is the joy of it all. It's all intermingled. You got to really look big picture. You can't look at a little tiny thing. There's an old saying, there's lies, damn lies in statistics. And as a silly physicist, I look at most people talking statistics and go, what the hell's wrong with you? You don't really understand. You can't look, oh, just this one thing. Well, the economy is much more complicated than that. It has a lot of things going on. And there's no one or two different things you can look at and say, that's the silver bullet. So think about it a little bit when you see these things. If I'm wrong, please, drop me a line and say, hey, I disagree with you. I'd love to have you on the channel. Let's talk about it. But I think interest rates going down would be an additional kidney punch to people who can't really deal with that kidney punch right now. Everybody have a great weekend.